We are looking at the Week 4 NFL First Look. In this video, we have another 13-game main slate for Sunday. So let's get started. As always, I would appreciate it if you guys would hit the like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate that. If you want to follow on Twitter, it's at the DFS process there. And then if you want to join, now is the time because I have put a discount on the NFL season with the other sports ending, with baseball coming to a close, with the postseason starting today, and NBA Finals starting today as well, so those will be over in a couple weeks. So football will be the only sport that we have, one of the big sports that we have. Then we'll have golf, probably a bigger golf contest. Maybe League of Legends makes its triumphant return. But if you wanted to get in for football, that is where to go. The website is dfsprocess.net. Looking back at last night, Lamar Jackson kind of ruined a lot of things because I expected him to kind of compete with Mahomes, maybe have a similar... I expected him to outscore Mahomes just because I thought they would end up winning the game, but just couldn't get it going from the beginning. And, just kind of a shame because it was one of the best games on paper. It didn't end up being that because the Ravens couldn't keep up with Patrick Mahomes. But looking at Sunday slate, we have some pretty fun games in some of these spots. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of good viable options all over the place. So we'll be starting off at quarterback as always, where we have Lamar Jackson. Currently, the Ravens have the highest implied total for this main slate. They're at 32, and then Mahomes is right behind him at 30, and then Russell Wilson, 30.25. So no surprise that the three highest team totals are the quarterbacks are the most expensive. So if you want to play any of those three, it's going to be tough for me to tell you to not to play, to just cross one out if you play a bunch of lineups. I would say that based on everything, I like Wilson the most against that Miami defense. I think he's probably going to have to even throw a little bit more with Carson out just because Hyde is a viable runner, but I think Wilson is just going to rely on his passing a little bit more. It is a spot where you can just destroy this Miami defense. They are not good on the ground at stopping the rushing game or the passing game. Wilson has back-to-back 5 touchdown performances, and he can also run with his legs a little bit, so he gives you all the upside in the world. He also throws a deep ball better than anybody in the league right now, and he gets a date with Miami, so potentially some big plays coming up once again for Seattle this weekend. And then I like Mahomes second. Just the price tag on him is really nice, 7,400. Looked unstoppable last night against a very tough defense. Heading into that game, the Ravens were the best defense in football, and he made them look silly with a 5-touchdown performance. Threw for almost 400 yards. He gets another tougher matchup against the Patriots defense, but for Mahomes, don't know if there's anything such as a tough matchup. He has yet to throw a pick on this year. Looks as crisp as ever. So I like Wilson, Mahomes, and then I would probably play Lamar Jackson, and then the fourth guy I would look at is like Prescott. I like Prescott a little bit more than Josh Allen. Josh Allen looked good last week. I just think that some of his performances are a little bit unsustainable. He's completing a really high percent of his passes. Also, they almost blew that game last week. He also stole some touchdowns away from Devin Singletary. But I guess that's going to happen. That's what happens when you have a rushing quarterback. I just don't know if he's going to continue, if you can rely on him to throw 4 touchdown passes every single week. This matchup against the Raiders defense, they are not great, but they've looked okay the first couple weeks. It's definitely a similar matchup to last week that he had against Rams. He is looking like a really good player so far this year. I just don't know if I would play him over Mahomes at basically the same price tag, or Wilson, or go a little bit cheaper for Prescott or Murray. So I think it makes for a decent GPP play, but I'm just not going to be on him, in cash at least. Prescott has also had to just use his arm in a crazy amount. He threw for 450 yards the last 2 weeks plus. Threw for 472 against Seattle last week. He just has to keep doing that because his defense can't stop anyone. So they're involved in shootouts every single week. Prescott this week against the Cleveland offense, maybe their defense will be able to slow them down a little bit. Cleveland offense also has the ability to just put up a lot of points, so we could see Prescott throw for a lot again. It's just something that you're not going to project. You're not going to project him to throw for 450 yards, throw for 50, 60 times almost a week. So for that reason, I think I would go a little bit cheaper at quarterback, like a Deshaun Watson. That would make for a great play this week. He's only 6,600. He is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. He just has gotten off to a tough start because the matchups have just been atrocious for him. At KC to start the year, and then against two of the best defenses in football, against the Ravens and the Steelers. Now he gets a matchup against a terrible Minnesota defense, a terrible Minnesota secondary, that he can just burn them through the ground and through the air. David Johnson has also struggled so far, so maybe they'll rely on Watson a little bit more. But this defense is so bad. Watson has some deep threats that he can throw to, like Kenny Stills, who hasn't got that much playing time, but Kenny Stills can, catch a long pass. You have Will Fuller still, Brandon Cooks. They have Randall Cobb, so they have some decent receivers. Probably a Watson-Fuller stack. Looks pretty nice this week. Could see them connect maybe once, maybe twice. I'm not looking at Jared Goff at all at 67. I'd rather go to Watson or Murray. Same thing with Big Ben. I'm not playing him against Tennessee with Watson at that same price tag. And you have Cam Newton cheaper. So based on the pricing, I love the price tags on Watson and Cam Newton to bounce back. Against Kansas City, they're going to probably be trailing, or it's going to be a high-scoring game at least. So we'll see Cam Newton have to make some plays with his arm and with his legs, and he can definitely do that. He has 4 rushing touchdowns already on the year, so it gives you that big-time upside in that department. I'm not interested in Joe Burrow at 63, or Tom Brady, or Tannehill. A lot of guys I can just cross out in this range, because if I was playing anybody in the 6K range, it would be Cam Newton. It would be Deshaun Watson. In the 7K range, you have plenty of options with Wilson and Mahomes and Prescott as my favorites. And then below 6K, you also have some really good options. You have Stafford at home against the Saints defense that has looked pretty vulnerable throughout the first 3 weeks. Stafford came out and surprisingly got a win in Arizona last week. Looked pretty good out there. He's just a solid quarterback. He normally is not going to score like 30 fantasy points just because he doesn't do anything with his legs. But with his arm, he can definitely make some plays. Price tag on him goes down in a date which could be a potential shootout against the Saints. And then we have Drew Brees at 5,800. That price tag just jumps off the page. He's not at home where you normally would like to play Brees, but he's in a dome again in Detroit, so I feel good about playing Brees. At 5,800, this price tag is just really nice. Starting off the year, he was 6,800, then 7K in week 2. Then we get a big price discount down to 5,800. I think he's the play that people are going to go to in cash games because he also looks like he might get Michael Thomas back this week, his number one weapon on the outside, so that's going to be really good for Brees and that offense. And then anybody cheaper than Brees, like, is just tournament plays. I would go to Brees as my favorite, like 5K play. You have Baker Mayfield against Dallas, could be a nice tournament option. Then you have nobody else that really looks okay. Maybe Fitzpatrick for tournaments, just because he has that upside. And Seattle defense also has given up a ton of yards and a ton of points throughout the first couple weeks. And that's kind of it. Like, I'm not playing Daniel Jones. I'm not really playing. Not playing Haskins against Baltimore. Not playing Carr, and Trubisky has taken a backseat to Foles. And Foles isn't super cheap. He's 5,700 against a Indiana defense that looked pretty good last week. So quarterbacks this week, my top 5, top 6 quarterbacks to consider. Starting at the bottom would be Drew Brees at just 6,800. That is just too cheap. For Brees, Cam Newton at 64, Watson at 66, Prescott at 72, Mahomes and Wilson are the guys I'm looking at the QB position. Moving on to running backs this week, we have Alvin Kamara as the most expensive guy, and that is rightfully so. He has looked unstoppable throughout the last 2 weeks. Even in week 1, he was good with 2 touchdowns, although he didn't, if you just look at the numbers, they weren't great, but lately he's been getting it done on the ground and in the air without Michael Thomas the last 2 weeks. Even if Michael Thomas returns, Kamara is still going to get targeted out of the backfield, just, take down a couple of these targets. He's still going to get his carries, maybe even more. 6 carries is really low for Kamara, but he is their best playmaker right now. Thomas might be a little bit banged up, might not be 100% either, so we'll see if he plays a full workload. But Kamara at 8K looks like the guy that you would want to play. You could even pair him with Brees. That's what I like to do this week. Elliott is 78. It's going to be tough to pay for both of these guys. He's not going to get as much ownership because everybody will go to Kamara. So it could make for a nice tournament pivot, but I like Kamara the most. Same thing with Dalvin Cook. Guess you could, if you want to go cheap at receiver, you could definitely play both of them. But it's also a spot where everybody's going to go to Kamara. These guys are going to get a little bit less ownership. I kind of like Cook over Elliott this week just because I think Cook is on the verge of having another breakout. He only had 5 targets last week, 2 catches. His involvement in the passing game should come, and he is facing off against the Houston defense that has been the worst rush defense in football. So I like Cook a lot this week to pair with Kamara if you want. I'm not playing Derrick Henry against that Pittsburgh front 7. Eckler looked really good. He got involved in the passing game, which was great to see with Justin Herbert. Got 11 targets, caught all 11 of them for 87 yards and a touchdown. He's playable against Tampa Bay at 7,100. Then you have Connor. Looks all right against Tennessee at 69. The price tag isn't super cheap on him. You're going to be paying for production from James Conner. Josh Jacobs is a good price point, tougher matchup against Buffalo. I like some other running backs a little bit more, like Jonathan Taylor at 66. Then you have James Robinson against Cincinnati. Another awful rush defense. They're going to rely on him on the ground. He can also catch a bunch of passes out of the backfield, so he looks really good at 6,500. And then Chris Carson looks like he's going to miss some time, so we could look at his backup Carlos Hyde at 53. And then we have Mike Davis at 57 against Arizona. It's not the easiest spot, but you're getting a guy that's going to get touches. He got 21 touches without McCaffrey last week. Kind of took that McCaffrey role, got involved in the passing game with 9 targets, 8 catches, got into the end zone. It's at home in Carolina. I think he looks like a pretty good cheap running back play at 5,700 for the amount of touches he's going to get. Montgomery looks playable this week because Cohen is out with a torn Achilles, I believe, or a torn ACL. And I don't know if I will be that interested in paying down at running back. There's nobody, unless some injury breaks, like in the next couple days, that seems like I'll be playing anybody below $5,000. So I think Kamara looks the best play at running back. And then the other guy that I like a lot is going to be 5,700 for Mike Davis, just because he's going to get probably 13 to 15 carries, maybe like 5 to 8, maybe 10 targets in the backfield. And 57 is just really cheap for a guy that has the path to get 20 plus touches. And moving on to wide receivers, we have Hopkins at 8,500 against Carolina. He's just a target monster. He has 12, 9, and 16 targets throughout the first 3 weeks. It's just going to be tough to pay up at running back and wide receiver and feel good about paying up. Like, for everybody, it's just going to be tough. So I'm not, unless some value breaks out, I think there are enough cheap plays at wide receiver, enough players in the 6,500 range that you don't need to play Hopkins. If Thomas is in, you could play him at almost $1,000 cheaper. You have Lockett against Miami at 7K. But I kind of like Metcalf a little bit more at his price point. Metcalf should have had 2 touchdowns. He let go of the football, got it punched out, and then he lost points because he fumbled it into the end zone. So he should have had 2 touchdowns, but is what it is. He has looked really good. He has averaged almost 100 yards throughout the first 3 weeks. And then we have Allen Robinson, who gets to play with Nick Foles instead of Trubisky, so that should help his production at 6,700. We have Keenan Allen, who has just been insane with the targets. Talk about Hopkins being a target monster after week 1 where he played with Tyrod Taylor and didn't really get involved. 2 weeks since he's played with Justin Herbert, 10 targets and 19 targets. Last week he counted for over 30% of Herbert's targets. 6,500 for him is just really, really cheap. So I am all over that price tag on Keenan Allen. And the second guy that I like a lot is Chris Godwin is probably going to miss some time with a hamstring injury. So we get the touchdown god Mike Evans, who last week had 2 catches, 2 yards for 2 touchdowns. Never saw that kind of stat line. Don't think we'll ever see that kind of stat line going forward, or at least for a while. But Mike Evans is going to take over that number 1 role with Chris Godwin out or projected to be out for this week. Also, the other wide receiver, Scotty Miller, is dealing with some injuries, so we'll see if he gives it a go this week or if he's going to be 100%. So I feel like Tom Brady's going to have to rely on Mike Evans. This game could potentially be a sneaky stack, run it back with Evans and Keenan Allen on the other side. So I definitely like both of those guys. Both are in great price ranges. You're not breaking the bank for either one, and both should. Keenan Allen should definitely get 10 plus targets. And this week, I think Mike Evans should get 10 plus targets if Godwin is indeed out. So I love those two in that 6K range. They're my favorite plays in that 6,500 range. You have Amari Cooper if you wanted to go to him. You have DK Metcalf, also I like at 6,800. And then the low 6K range, we have Kenny Golladay at 6,000, who looked good in his return, 6 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. Facing off against the Saints defense that has looked vulnerable throughout the first couple weeks. He will probably be matched up against Marshawn Lattimore, but don't know if it will make too much of a difference. Like we saw Lazard be matched up on Lattimore a lot on Sunday night, and he kind of made him look silly. So I think Golladay at home looks playable at 6,000. Although it is a little bit risky just because the matchup is going to be tough with Lattimore. And then below 6K, we have Will Fuller. If you wanted to play Will Fuller, stack him up with Deshaun Watson. That's definitely something that you can do this week against this terrible Vikings defense. We have OBJ against this awful Dallas defense at 5,800. Also looks really good. And then we have Robbie Anderson at 54 if you want to play him. He looks okay. He's looked like the number one option for Bridgewater throughout the first 3 games. And then the Colts are dealing with so many injuries at the receiver position. Michael Pittman is out. They've lost the other wide receiver who started the year. Campbell, second-year player, I believe, is out. So Zach Pascal and Hilton are going to get all the snaps that they can handle at the receiving position. Pascal is only 4,400. He looks like a decent cheap play. And Hilton hasn't really looked good at all so far. So it's going to be a little bit tough to trust, but this is definitely the spot with all the injuries that he potentially could break out. Or because Philip Rivers just rely on his tight ends more with Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox and rely on Jonathan Taylor and Hines out of the backfield. So even though they're missing a lot of guys at receiver, they have more than capable options to just kind of shift some of that production to the running backs or wide receivers. And then I'd say the other cheap play that I really like this week at receiver is going to be $4,400 for Sammy Watkins. Like you could play Watkins, you could play Hardman. Both guys are similar price ranges, but I think Watkins is just a little bit safer in terms of getting the targets. Week 2 he got injured against that Charger, so I'm not putting really any stock into it. Almost had a touchdown last night, got stopped at the 2-yard line. It's just a spot where Mahomes is going to throw for like 300 yards at least every single week almost. It's a spot against the Patriots where they have the second highest total right now. Could see Watkins at 4,400 be one of the best value receivers. So I know he's the third option for them on offense, but third offense in a Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid led offense is basically better than a lot of guys' second options. So I like Watkins a lot just based on the price tag, and the price range is not great at that spot. And then at tight end, I'll touch on the guys that I'll consider. Tight ends this week, look at Kelsey if you want to pay up. You have Darren Waller, who got a nice price discount because he looked pretty bad. Didn't look 100% last week against the Patriots, but could see him get more involved this week against the Bills. Then we have Jonnu Smith, depending on the injury of A.J. Brown. We have Hawkinson at 4,800. But I kind of like Dalton Schultz a lot at 43 against the Browns defense, who gives it up to tight ends every single week. We have also a very cheap Jack Doyle, who will have to get more involved in the passing game. We have a cheap Mo Alley Cox. I'd rather go to Doyle with him being cheaper. We have Gronk, if you want to play him, or O.J. Howard. One of those two are probably going to have a big week with, or at least a decent week with the injury to Godwin. And then we have Jordan Akins at 3,300 gets a good spot against Minnesota. He has outplayed and outperformed. Fells, so far, he's playing about 80% of the snaps, so that's good to see at only 3,300. And that's it. I think the cheapest right now I'd go to is going to be Fells at his price point. And then defenses to look at for this week. At the bottom, the cheapest defense I'd probably consider rocking with is going to be maybe the Texans defense, because although the Vikings looked really good last week, we've seen Cousins just implode at sometimes. So we could see the Texans be okay at 2,500. I think you could take a shot on the maybe the Bengals against Minshew, although it's going to be tough to trust them. But really, I think the Texans look okay at their price point, or you can go up to the Bears defense against the Colts, or play the Colts defense against the Bears. They also look pretty good. And that is kind of it. We'll see where the Cowboys are at. I don't want to play them at 3,300. If they were super cheap, I might have taken a shot against Baker. But they are priced up, so I'm not that interested. And then pay up options, play the Ravens against Haskins if you want. It's going to be tough for me to pay $4,000 for a defense. But yeah, that is pretty much it. That's all I've been looking at for Week 4 on DraftKings. Let's jump over to Fanduel. All right, over on Fanduel, no surprise, you have Lamar Jackson sitting at almost $10,000. That is going to be tough to get to. I will not be getting to that price tag. You have Wilson at $600 cheaper with showing a similar upside. You have Mahomes almost $1,000 cheaper. You have Josh Allen $1,000 cheaper. So I'm not playing Lamar Jackson on FanDuel. I think that's just a really crazy price tag. I'd rather go down a little bit, like to Watson at 7,800. Drew Brees is priced kind of where he should be on FanDuel. On DraftKings, his price tag is just really cheap. Brees looks viable on FanDuel. It's not a must. And then for anybody below 7K, don't have that many good options. Maybe take a shot on a Baker. Maybe take a shot on a Justin Herbert. He's only 6,700. I think you kind of know exactly who you would stack him with. This would be a little bit more of a tournament play, but they have not been scared to throw the ball with him a lot. Threw 49 times last week. He's thrown for over 300 yards the first 2 games. So I think he could be a nice, a low-owned play that not that many people consider. But I feel pretty good about playing him because I would play him with Keenan Allen, and those two correlation is through the roof right now. So the guy that I like the most right now at quarterback, just based on the price tag, is probably going to be Deshaun Watson. You can stack him with Will Fuller if you want, or with Brandon Cooks, or maybe with his tight end Akins. But he is just really affordable. He is cheaper than too many quarterbacks that I don't think it should be cheaper than. This is a spot where Watson can have a breakout game. This is the best spot by far that he's had so far. He just has really, really tough spots to start the year. So I like him a lot. You think they're going to pile on the points this week. Could see Watson have a big game on the ground as well. So I like Watson a lot at running quarterback. Moving on to running back, we have Ezekiel Elliott, who is more expensive than Kamara, so you're probably going to get no ownership for Elliott this week, or very limited, because everybody's going to play Kamara. People are probably going to want to play Dalvin Cook in a much better spot in terms of a rush defense at 87. Then you have, drops off a little bit. I'm not playing Henry, Chubb. You could play him if you want, but always a little bit scary thinking that Kareem Hunt can take some of his touches and take some of his touchdowns. Carson is going to miss. Taylor looks a little bit too expensive on FanDuel. I'm not interested, mainly because we're about to get to a string of running backs who are just really, really cheap. And that's going to start with Austin Eckler at 6,900 after looks like he's going to be a huge role in that offense going forward with Herbert. 6,900, that looks really cheap. Joe Mixon against Jacksonville is playable. James Robinson against that Cincinnati rush defense looks really good. Then you have Mike Davis at 63, looks also playable. So you get a lot of guys in that range. You have a cheap Carlos Hyde if you want to go with him. A cheap Leonard Fournette, although you don't know who's going to get some of those touches, whether it be him or whether it be Jones. So some risk there. But I think there's just plenty of guys right in this high 6K, low 7K range that all look really good. So pair Alvin Kamara with any one of these guys, I think you'll be set up pretty nicely. Right now, I like the price tag on James Robinson at 6,600. I like the fact that he is going to get a lot of the touches on the ground, probably 15. The only thing, Chris Thompson got 2 carries last week, so they're really going to rely on Robinson. Also, the game script kind of went away from the ground, But good to see that even if that does happen, he's going to be out there and still going to get those passing down situations a lot of the time. Thompson was out there on some of the third downs, but they did leave Robinson in for a lot of them too. So I feel good about him in this great matchup. And then at wide receiver, you have Thomas as your most expensive guy, so go play him or Hopkins, kind of pick your poison. Flip a coin between those two. Hill is 8K against New England. This doesn't get me super excited. I go cheaper with like Mike Evans. 74, going to be the number one option with Godwin doubtful. Galladay is too expensive on Fanduel. Not interested in Galladay and not that interested in Kupp or Juju. I would much rather go to Amari Cooper at 71. I'd rather go to Keenan Allen at 69. I think he is just going to play a big role in that offense. You can't get this sort of volume and this sort of touches and this sort of targets at this price tag for much longer. Like, Herbert is locked into him. It's not the best matchup on paper, but it's not like he's had easy matchups heading into it. He's faced Kansas City. He's been okay, and the Panthers' defense has also looked okay. So Herbert and Allen stack looks playable, at least Allen as a one-off. And then you have Metcalf I like at 6,900. Love the price tag on DK Metcalf. You have a cheaper players like OBJ or Devontae Parker that look playable. And then you have Will Fuller down at 6,100. He's always a hit or miss guy. Anytime he's chalk, seems like he always ends up getting injured. But this is the best spot that he's had at 6,100 against a Minnesota defense that is going to be prone to giving up long plays and long touchdowns. So this is a spot if you wanted to play Will Fuller to jump on. And then you have Watkins as a little bit more expensive at 56, so don't think he's as good of a play as he is on DraftKings. And then if you wanted to play Justin Jefferson, I think that's a little bit chasing because I could see Thielen easily have Thielen only got like 5 targets last week or 6 targets. So it's not like Jefferson's going to go nuts every single week. Then you have Brandon Cooks, 53 if you wanted to pivot away from, who's probably going to be a pretty popular Will Fuller this week. But give me Keenan Allen, and then I still think it's going to be tough for me not to like Mike Evans. With Tom Brady's just going to be glued onto him. So I love those two to pair with. And then at tight ends, we have Mark Andrews at 74, expensive. Waller at 67 is also expensive. I think I'll go a little bit cheaper right now is at tight end. You have some decent options below 5,000 with Jack Doyle right at that 5,000 range. Then you have Logan Thomas, Dalton Schultz, and Jordan Akins. I think all three of these guys are in play. All of them are in great spots, especially Schultz and Thomas. Especially Schultz and Akins with the matchup against Minnesota. You also have O.J. Howard, who will get more targets this week without Godwin. So I think I'll go with one of those guys as my cheaper plays at tight end, just to make some things work. And then defenses, same kind of defenses I mentioned over on DraftKings. You have the Colts are way more expensive, so they're going to be tough to get to. I think that you could look at the Steelers against Tennessee. You could look at the Bills defense. You could look at the Bears defense with the injuries to the Colts offense. And then if you wanted to go cheap, you have the Cardinals defense against the Panthers. They definitely look playable. And then that's kind of it for me. Maybe the Texans defense, just because the Vikings offense is just so hit or miss. And that's it at the defense. So these are the plays for FanDuel. If I wanted to play one more, maybe I'll probably put in Metcalf at 69. I like that price tag. Don't think I'll break the bank for any of the top receivers this week. So yeah, that is it for the video. It's a long one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you made it to the end or if you made it to most of it, I would appreciate if you guys would hit the like on it. If you want to get in for NFL, I can visit the website. Links in the description. Or you can visit the URL dfsprocess.net. Thanks for watching and best of luck this week.